What's up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be showing you 3 different ways to make your songs sound fuller. Now, you might be asking, what does fuller mean? Well, a lot of times I get mixes and they sound kind of thin. They're either lacking bass or they're lacking a frequency range, either, be it the low lows or the low mids, that just don't give the song enough energy and make it sound thin. So in today's video, I'm going to show you 3 different techniques to make your song sound fuller. Let's go. All right, guys. So for today, I'm going to be using a song by a good friend, Garrett Gregory. His song, Go On and Break It. It's out now. We're going to be using the stems from that for some examples. So the first tip is layering. If you're still in the production phase, this is easier than in the mix phase. So in the production phase, you can take an instrument and then double it, if it's a MIDI instrument, and play it again with a different sound, or taking the octave down in order for it to feel fuller. Or if it's a guitar, for instance, you can double the guitar and maybe put one on the left, one on the right. Those are all good techniques to make a song sound fuller in the production aspect. Here I'm going to show you the mixing aspect. So let's take this bass. This bass actually sounds pretty good, but I'm going to show you what I would do is if this bass didn't sound great and it was a kind of a thin recording. So let me just play you the bass as it is, then I'll show you what we can do with it. So you get the idea, decent sounding bass. Now, let's say this bass was a little bit thin, or we just want to manipulate it more, right? Thing I do with basses a lot is I'll duplicate the track and then duplicate the file, right? And then on the first one, you can use whatever EQ you want. We'll use Pro Q. And then I'll cut it down with a pretty sharp pass, right? And take this all the way down to like 200. Now you can play with the frequency, but 200 is always a pretty good start. And you can do like 36. Make sure you switch to natural phase, because when you're doing sharp passes like this, it tends to sound better. So we leave that on this one. And then we duplicate the EQ to the next track, right? And all we're going to do is just switch the pass here. And so now we just have the low pass or low cut, whatever you want to call it. So now what we have is the same bass, but with both frequencies separated. So on the first one, we have I hope you guys can hear that, but it's just the low lows, right? And then here we have the high end, or the upper registers. So now when we bring this in the mix, we'll just play this with like the guitars, or actually just the drums, right? Listen to what we can do to manipulate the bass. We can bring in the low end or bring down the high end, or you can also use this, compressing the low end and then boosting it to make it cut through more. There's a lot of ways you can suddenly manipulate a sound by splitting it frequency-wise. So let's check it out. So we tried boosting it and the bass came up quite a bit. You saw when I cut it, we got a really thin sounding song. So that could happen if this wasn't a bass with a lot of low end. Another thing we can do, like I said, is we could put a compressor on here. Let's grab our buddy, any of these millions of 1176s I have. Let's do fast release and medium attack. And let's just try to tame this down. So now we got a little more control of the low end, and then we can boost it up a bit more. Okay, cool. So now let's just hear this, what we had before, and then we'll play what we have now. So that was before, and then this is now with the tracks separated. So as you can hear, we have it a bit exaggerated on the low end, but you can hear how much fuller we made that bass just by changing the EQ and separating the bass into 2 different parts and then boosting up the low end part. This can also work in, the reverse way. If you have something that's just too bright, you can just cut it, cut the frequency like we did and bring that down. This happens a lot with like acoustic guitars, right? That might be a little too percussion-y. that a word? I'll split it and then bring the frequency of the guitar part, the high end, down a bit. And then that's, you know, that will help give it a little bit more warmth without losing all of the high end. So play around with this, use it on different instruments. It can really translate something to make it better. All right, so the next tip I got for you guys is dynamic contrast. And I use this a lot, especially in the master fader towards the end of a mix when I want something to lift up a bit more. Now you can do this on a micro level if you're using, you know, just the guitars. This works well too. If you want to bring the guitars up just a little bit in the chorus and then duck them in the verse, or, you know, whatever instruments you have. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go to my master fader and I'll just turn the automation on, and then let's take a listen. This is going to be a little bit of transition to like a pre-chorus. It will be a couple bars and then you'll hear it kind of come in there, right? So let's hear this. So let's say that's where our chorus drops. So what I'll do is I'll take the main fader, and a lot of times I'll use this on a plugin, but we can just do this on the fader for now to make it easier. And I'll bring it down a dB because I don't want to end up clipping this thing, right? Then I'll go to where it drops, which is on bar 28. And then I'll bring it up a dB just up till wherever, you know, I want to come back down to like the next verse or whatever. So just automate this up a dB. And now it's going to go from -1 dB to just 0. So take a listen and you can probably hear the difference. So you can tell it's subtle, but it does lift it a bit. Another thing you can do here, if you're on the stereo bus, right, is use a widener tool, whatever one you want. We can use the old school V3 from BX Digital, and then go to your stereo width and edit and automate that, right? And then when this comes in the same spot, we'll make it a bit wider, right? So so now you're also automating the volume, but you're also automating some width as well. So now you bring this up, you know, to 125 or something. And now let's hear the difference with both width and volume. So now you're hearing a pretty big difference there with the volume coming up a little bit and getting a little bit wider. And this can really be helpful in achieving excitement in a mix for the next section. And it works, and you know, it works reverse as well. You know, we're going from something big and wider back down to something a little more mono and a little lower, brings us back to the intimacy of the next verse. So that's a great way to create dynamics in a song that might be, you know, like a hip hop record where the volume's straight all the way through. This can really help to elevate or pull down the dynamics and emotion of the song. Okay, so the last tip I got for you guys is adding like subtle pads or synths in the background that will help thicken things up. It's good to usually have these sounds in the lower mids or the lower register of your frequency range. If they're too high, it gets kind of in the way, and it might get in the way of the vocals and so forth. But this song is a great example of that. What I'm gonna do to show you guys is I'm gonna just play the song, and I'm gonna turn this main music track I have on and off. And I want you to notice how we lose a little bit of fullness in the mix just by turning that on and off. And then after, I'm gonna play you the sound. You're gonna be probably surprised at what it is. So you hear we lose something when that's not playing, right? Now take a listen to what it sounds like on its own. So you hear there's a pad there. There's also that kind of organ sound, which is what we kind of heard in the mix, which is a higher register thing. But that pad and all those little like swirly sounds that are moving from speaker to speaker can really help add some dimension and depth and fullness to this mix. And I think it's a great thing to do if you're feeling like your song's not quite full enough. try adding some different pads in there to make it just feel a little bit bigger and tuck them in the mix so it's not heard but more felt. All right, guys, so those are 3 tips for making your song sound a bit fuller. I hope it was helpful for you. Let me know what your tips are for me in the comments below so I can try some of those. If you need your songs mixed and mastered, hit me up at mixandmastermysong.com. You can also find my vocal presets and courses there as well. Talk to you soon.